back to the Unfuckwithable Woman podcast. In this episode, we're going to explore capacity and repair and having a little look around that in the nervous system. So lovely to have you here. So get yourself comfortable and let's dive in. So there is a misunderstanding about resilience that I want to correct at the beginning of this episode. That resilience is not the ability to never break. It is not the ability to stay calm at all times. It is not emotional suppression. It is not being the strong one. It is not absorbing everything without reacting. Resilience is the ability to return to yourself, to return to connection, to return after rupture, to return after activation. And most women were never taught how to return. They were taught how to endure, and there is a big difference. So what capacity actually means when I use the word capacity is I'm speaking about nervous system capacity. Capacity is your ability to feel intensity without collapsing into survival. It is the width of your window of flow. If your capacity is narrow, small stresses can feel catastrophic. A difficult conversation feels like a threat. A disappointed partner feels like abandonment. A child's emotional meltdown feels overwhelming. A boundary feels like danger, so you react, you escalate, you shut down, you overfunction, you withdraw, you numb, you go into fight. And not because you are dramatic, it's because your system is at full capacity. It cannot take a tiny little drop, like it's full. It can't take any more. And capacity is not about personality. It is about how much activation your nervous system can hold while staying present. I'm going to say that again. Its capacity is about how much activation your nervous system can hold while staying present. And capacity is built or narrowed relationally. Now, capacity narrows in environments and experiences where emotions are overwhelming or were overwhelming. Can also be past tense as well. Where there's been conflict that was explosive or silent, like even passive. Where repair was rare or not there at all. Needs were burdensome, like you couldn't ask for what you needed because it was always a problem. Unpredictability was common in these spaces. And if you grew up having to monitor a room like a hypervigilance state and where your nervous system stayed on alert consistently, if you were the easy one and your nervous system learnt to suppress, and also if you had to be self-sufficient early, like the parentified child, your nervous system learnt isolation. These adaptations were protective and all very warranted and very welcome. And it's just really good to map and understand what these adaptations are and that they are protective. The body and the nervous system only ever responds in ways that are protective for you. But protective adaptations can limit capacity in adulthood because now when life activates you, your system moves quickly into survival. It's your default. What happened to you as a child and growing up and how you learnt to protect yourself now moves into a default. It's a pattern of your nervous system, and it generally is wired around survival. And you interpret that activation as a personal failure instead of recognizing it as that your nervous system, that its capacity has narrowed. It's now not in this kind of abundant flow. It's now narrowed and constricted. And when you can understand when your nervous system is narrowed and constricted and you don't have a wide and quite abundant window of flow, then you sometimes don't understand why you're responding the way you're responding to things, because that connection with the nervous system and in the body and what's happening at the time of that activation, you go into default patterns. So when we can recognize and pattern, which is what somatic therapy and what I do in the clinic space is so important and so incredible, is that when you can pattern your own nervous system and your own window of flow, and when you can feel that being impacted by or narrowing, which is really clear to see when you're working in the space of with your nervous system and repatterning, then you can start to see when that your capacity is narrowing, and you can start to enact. You can make a different choice. You can enact a new pattern. You can actually consciously slow things down and move them in a way that is much more nourishing and keeps your capacity wide and anchored and quite buoyant in any kind of challenge that you are in at that time. I'm really great. I'm going to say a little personal share here. I am really good at the rupture and repair. Like rupture and repair for me has been from my early stages in motherhood. So my eldest is 18. So the early stages of motherhood, I innately started to understand that motherhood in itself, and when you haven't had a really strong, clear, healthy model of what a mother-child relationship looks like from your own parentage, then as a parent, as a mother, you're kind of rewriting the script. You're kind of pioneering a whole new way of parenting, of mothering, and of showing up for yourself too. And so I learned fairly early on that there were going to be lots of ruptures, and ruptures are, are big mistakes. I don't even like to say they're big mistakes. That's why I use the word rupture. But it is where you've ruptured the connection with yourself and the other person in the relational field. Like in this instance, my children, my child. And kind of using that, I learned very early on, I use that as a really great testing ground in order how to understand when I was rupturing or the rupture occurred, and then what I did after the rupture. And understanding that there was another model that I could go in to rebuild that connection, rebuild that rupture and repair it. And in that, repair capacity. And I found this is why isn't everybody else doing this? This is amazing. This is an amazing formula. And I have kept and I've worked on it quite steadily now for over 18 years. And it has been incredibly incredible model, an incredible way to, in the relational field, to keep things very connected, very human, very vulnerable. And it has allowed me to understand that when we have these ruptures that are always there in the world, in the relational field, in the day-to-day, that the way to tend to them in your system and in the relational field is to actually tend to the rupture, right at the rupture of what happened to cause that rupture, taking personal accountability and responsibility, as well as knowing yourself enough to see what's yours and what's theirs, and being open enough to have a conversation, to self-reflect, to hold yourself accountable in order to repair that. And the most beautiful thing about that is that the repair that can be made after a rupture rebuild your capacity in such an incredible, strengthening and anchored, deeply rooted way that often when you come back around and something similar happens, you've got the capacity and understanding of how to move through that without necessarily having to rupture the connection or rupture in the situation. And you can see this, as another example is in relationship where there's conflict, where, you just have a little think for yourself in your life, where that you may have felt flooded with emotion. As I reflected, my own parenting, huge rupture and repair model in my own parenting. But you might have a parenting moment where you reacted and felt a sense of shame. And that's a rupture and repair opportunity as well. A time where stress tipped you into shutdown or overwhelm. And, you can feel it in the body as like a little bit of anxiety, heat in the chest, numbness in the limbs, tunnel vision, a tight jaw, or you kind of hold, like you tighten down, clench down in your pelvis as well, or even the urge to run away, the urge to flee. And all of these different indicators in the body tell you that your window of capacity is narrowing. And, this is the opportunity where we can start to turn towards the sensation and what's happening in the body and start to tend to what's here. And that is like tending to and supporting your capacity. When I have worked through these types of ruptures and repaired them, and it takes time to repair ruptures. They're not like a one conversation thing. It's not like a nice little box neatly tied in a bow and you put it off to one side. It is like an active, living, live, breathing dynamic that you tend to, just like growing a plant or, tending to something that is alive, like an animal, like really tending to it in the way it needs. And as I've worked through these time and time again, in the first initial stages, it was difficult. I did feel a lot of shame. I felt a lot of guilt. I felt like I wanted to hide underneath a rock. I felt like such a failure. And as I moved through those sticky and difficult, challenging experiences that I was having in the body, what I started to see is that a strength within me in order, like a humility and a strength within me in order to really tend to or fix what was broken. And I developed deeper listening skills, not just for myself, but in the situation for the other person, and trying to understand their point of view and their impact, the impact of it on them, which allowed me to understand more of myself and the impact on me. You can't go around these type of ruptures, like we're taught to go around them. We're taught to sort of neatly wrap them up. And it is really like a straight through the guts. It really is like a showing up in vulnerability, unsure, in complete, like, I don't know which way this is going to go type of situation. And you're really relying on your own sense of self and holding and anchoring and the supports around you in order to be able to do that as well. And as I did that, like I understood more and more and more that I had this incredible strength inside of me that is mine, that is impacted by these situations, but that is not somebody else's. I have earned all of those mistakes that I've made and all of those ruptures that I've had a part in, and all the repair processes, which I have learnt so much from and rebuilt myself through. And with that rebuilding, you're also connecting with that inner archetypal mother. You're connecting with that, all-encompassing, beautiful, accepting, stable force of that mother energy that you can feel held in, supported, and guided by. And so each time I've gone into these types of dynamics, I have rebuilt my capacity and strengthened my capacity and widened my capacity. So when a rupture has taken place, the focus then really switches not to what has happened, but it really switches to the repair. Like, how can we repair this? If you want to repair it, not all ruptures are repairable, or you want to repair. And they can be repaired immediately, or they can take some time to repair. Repair becomes a primary focus for you, yourself internally, as well as for the relationship as well. And every relationship in its absolute most beautiful form of connection and vulnerability and love and intimacy will rupture. It's inevitable. Rupture is just part of life and living and relationships. And every relationship has ruptures. And as I said, it's the repair that becomes a centralized focus. It's not so much the mistake. It's more the balm to soothe what actually has happened. And if you're having a relationship and there's never been a rupture, then I'd have to actually question whether that relationship does have the depths and the anchoring and the foundations, because life has ruptures. The living has ruptures. You have ruptures in yourself when ideas break down, when disease is in the body, when you're sick, when you can't do the thing you want to do, when you're heartbroken, when you've not been able to control something that you thought you had control of, when you've had a car accident, like when you've had something happen to you that's out of your control, that's a rupture. And the problem itself is not the rupture. The problem is the absence of the repair. So when you have a rupture, that is not the problem. The problem, the situation that's ruptured becomes a problem when there is no repair, when you don't go in to repair it. So if your mother never apologized, or if conflict ended in silence, or you went, to bed separately after an argument and you never resolved it, or if emotion was dismissed, if withdrawal from the situation was normal, if pride replaced vulnerability, your nervous system learnt that rupture equals danger. Now, in adulthood, you may avoid conflict entirely. It could escalate quickly. You could find yourself shutting down, or you could be cutting people off prematurely. It's not because you're immature. It's because your body equates rupture with loss. And repair in this process teaches the nervous system something radically different. Repair says we can disconnect and we can come back. That you can lose regulation and flow and still be loved. That conflict does not equal abandonment, and mistakes do not equal exile. Repair is not a weakness, it is a relational strength. It is a deep commitment, and it is deeply intergenerational. If repair was not modeled in your mother line, you are not only learning a skill, you are interrupting inheritance. So I didn't have that model in my upbringing. It was something that I came to innately, to understand that I did not have the modeling to be the mother that I longed to be, and that I'm going to have to fumble along this journey, and they're going to have to show me some grace, and I'm going to have to show myself some grace. So instead of getting bogged down in the early stages, I was always bogged down in the mistake. I learnt to see the mistake as a great learning opportunity, and I focused on the repair. What do I need to do here to get the connection back? What do I need to do to not just reform the connection, but stabilize it and make it deeper, and that the other person feels that they can reconnect to me, and they can feel safe in that holding, and that understand that my focus is to tend to what had happened and fix it, not that it wasn't just lip service, that it was literally going to be my words matching my actions, and then they could feel it and see it in the environment and in the repair process. So repair it can be tricky. This is not an easy skill. I'm just saying now, this is not you need to start somewhere. We all start at the bottom, we work our way up, and we all develop the skill if we choose to. And the first times and the first little places and spaces, and even now, repair to me, even in certain dynamics and situation, feels hard. It feels hard. I don't know where to begin. Sometimes I feel overwhelmed, and there is a lot of shame. So when you repair, it requires you tending to shame within yourself and in the situation. It requires staying present when your instinct says to withdraw. It requires saying, I lost regulation, like I was not regulated. I didn't act in the way that I would have liked to have responded. It requires listening without defensiveness. It requires softening when pride wants to harden. That is advanced nervous system work. So this is what I do in clinic space, what I do in women's circles and when I work in groups, is metabolizing shame and metabolizing these big, sticky, difficult emotions that we have, particularly with vulnerability, and moving through that and finding an anchored place to sit with that and to be with that, so we can actually move with these sorts of models like rupture and repair in a more conscious and present way, and more supported way too. So all the things that I've kind of explained and shared with you in and around, feeling hypervigilant and things in your system and seeing danger everywhere because you didn't have that rupture and repair model as an example in your day-to-day, that dysregulation that you probably live through, the lens of through your entire childhood, has a sense of danger with it. And so when something happens, when there's a rupture, that's the pattern that you'll go into, and you will be feeling a sense of danger because your system is not in flow, it is dysregulated. And when you move into adulthood, then if we're tending to and showing up to and doing the nervous system work and tending to the body, then we have the opportunity to choose something different. But in a lot of instances, our body may not have developed that trust yet. And we sometimes are not encouraged to have the support, or don't think about actually patterning our own systems, our own nervous systems, in order to see how they're responding, so we can repattern them if we choose to, and build this into our body, a new sense of safety and trust within the body that we may not be able to recognize because we have other patterns formed from our youth. So this is why capacity and repair must be practiced. It's a skill. It's not a performance, it's practiced. And we generally do that in a somatic session through titration. And titration is where we move from the context of the situation or the unsafety that we're feeling, the dysregulation, into a sense of safety, regulation, and pleasure. And we move between the two spaces in a clinic session, and that's how we build and expand capacity. That's how we identify capacity. We build capacity and then we expand capacity. It's not through moving into a situation that is traumatic and that we've, had that really places into a state of overwhelm or stress or trauma, because it will flood the system. And when we flood the nervous system, we re-traumatize the system. And so when we work with building capacity and expanding capacity, we do it through little movements, slow movements, gentle movements, and we do this titration method. And so as we get more comfortable with that, we expand that capacity through the titration, because we start to understand the mapping in our system and we know when to move backwards and forwards. And we expose the body to small doses of activation, and then we follow it by settling. And you can see this, like if you've had a hard conversation, a really difficult conversation. So imagine that's happening on one side, and then you move back into regulation. Like another example is you feel angry for 30 seconds, and then you move into presence, move into some breathing. Or you sit with your grief briefly, and you feel your grief, and then you look in and around the space you're in and you identify things that are pleasurable. So we move in this fashion and we stay a little bit more in the conflict, a little bit more each time than the last time. And then we return back, and then we go backwards and forwards. And so over time, what happens in this is that the window of flow, that the window of flow of tolerance starts to widen. And the nervous system learns that I can feel this difficult, sticky, complex context and I can survive. That I can stay here when it's hard and not lose connection. That I can step away and that I can come back in. That what's going on with that other person is not necessarily a personal reflection on me, that they're doing their thing, and that doesn't mean that it's the end. And that things can be severed and we can return back to repair them. And this is what starts to build resilience. It's not suppression, not perfection, it's a return all the time to repair, that rupture and repair model. And as I've developed over the years, this, really skilled in this model of living, really, the challenges have got more complex, of course, and I'm able to move into deeper context. So where it started off in the arena of parenting for me and continued in that because it's a perfect and very fertile ground to actually practice in on the day-to-day, is that I can now start to move with my own deeper trauma context. I can now start to move in that and repair that within myself. In a clinical setting, this is not something I do for myself on my own. I have, I'm supported by therapists and other colleagues and things in order to be able to do that. And that starts then that I start to use that titration method and I build capacity for those particular events and experiences and start to integrate them more into my day-to-day, into my system, into who I am and how I actually work in my clinic space. And sometimes in the rupture and repair model, sometimes you don't even know how to repair it. Sometimes it's a matter of literally saying to yourself, I don't know what to do, or saying to, what I talk a lot to the creator, to source, please show me what I need to do next. And then trusting in your own body and the time it takes. You don't need to go straight back in and repair something. It can take time for you to even want to go back to repair it if you want to. And sometimes building capacity in yourself means not going to repair a rupture because it no longer serves you, because that relationship or that dynamic or that person's actions breached a boundary, and that is just a no-go. So then the repair then for yourself is actually backing yourself and repairing it internally and making it really clear externally. That's not going to be, you're not going to repair that. Like that is not an option for you, or that dynamic, that relationship is going to look very different moving forward for you. It's very dynamic. It's very in the moment and present and very dependent on so many different factors. And the most incredible thing about building capacity in this way and learning about repair and learning how to return is that you learn so much about yourself and life and how you want to create your living. And the connection with those around you just deepens so beautifully, and it feels so integral, to who you are. And you would be rebuilding that yourself, for yourself, through yourself, with those people that you choose to rebuild with. So the best thing when you have a rupture is really to bring it back to the present moment and slow it down and sit with what has happened and feel into what the next step is. And a big thing in the rupture and repair model is that you apologize, which is a beautiful thing as well, to hold yourself accountable if you have done something that has hurt another. And I think the biggest takeaway, that I'd love you to take away from this episode, is that it's not linear, it's not finite, it doesn't have to be done in a prescribed perfect way. I think the whole beauty and gratitude and incredible fertility and pulsation of life is showing up, and even if it means you're going to get it wrong, is absolutely showing up anyway and leaning into doing what you need to do, even if you don't have it right. So just starting and showing up and just starting. Even if it starts with, I don't know how to do this, but I want to give it a go. Perfect way to begin, and then just build that skill, build that muscle. It is a muscle, it is a skill, and it will strengthen over time, and it will strengthen your capacity within yourself as well. It's an incredible, incredible thing to work on and to work with in your day-to-day. And if you love what I've talked about in this episode and you're enjoying the podcast series, please share it, subscribe, please rate it, would be amazing. You can also message me, DM me, Briony at thesomatherapycollective.com. I'd love to hear what you feel and any questions or anything that the series or the episode has invoked inside of you. Let's keep the conversation going. And share it with somebody that you feel that is going through a really tough time right now. And it could be the message that they're needing to hear. Thank you so much for being here with me, remembering that it all starts in the body. The revolution starts in the body. And with each step that we take in this thing called life, just breathing and the softening and the sense of expansion and even the capacity to feel all of these different expressions in life and experiences in life is such a blessed thing. And so thank you so much for listening. I love bringing these episodes to you, and I check out my work at www.thesomatherapycollective.com. I'm on all the social platforms, Instagram under Briony Montgomery, TikTok. You can check this episode out on YouTube. I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook. And I have a really great new social enterprise dropping soon, which I'll be sharing with you. And I'd love to see you over in that space really soon. Thank you so much for being here. The Unfuckwithable Woman is hosted by Briony Montgomery of the Somatherapy Collective. Music by Finn Holloman. Photos by Beth Cronin. Find Briony at www.thesomatherapycollective.com, on Instagram through Briony Montgomery and the Reclaim Me Project, on YouTube through @Nervous System Support, on TikTok through Briony Montgomery. If this episode moves something in you, subscribe, share and leave a review. It helps more women find their way here.